Hi, I'm Tim Corvin, and the purpose of this video production is my intention to educate the public on how to protect themselves when confronted by law enforcement. I'm here to address why and how cops are corrupt, which of course is no secret. The why can be answered quickly, but some of the many hows will be explained as we analyze some dash cam footage from when I was arrested a few years ago down in Texas, crossing the panhandle there on an Interstate 40. So my knowledge on this subject comes from my own first-hand experience. I'm sure that there are many ways that cops are corrupt that I don't know about yet, but what I do know from my experience, we will analyze. And as you watch this, some of you may wonder why and how it is that I form the opinions that I have towards the police and why it is that I have the attitude towards cops that I have. So to address this, first let me explain to you a little bit about my background. Now, I grew up in a law enforcement family. My mother was an office administrator with the sheriff's department, put in a career there. Her second husband, my stepfather, whom I lived with during my teen years, he was a sheriff's official who put in a career on the force, as did one of his sons, my stepbrother, and I had a childhood best friend who I still keep in touch with to this day who put in a career on the force. So throughout my upbringing, I was always surrounded by all these law enforcement officials. I had youth league coaches and neighbors who just lived a few doors away and members of my church, cops all around me. And I know it was common to find myself sitting at a table full of cops listening to them tell their war stories, talking about their work experience stories. I went out on ride-alongs with them on occasions. And so coming from that environment, I always had the utmost respect for our law enforcement. So I was always taught to believe that the police were our friends. They're here to protect us from all of the evils out there in the world. And I was always told that whenever confronted by the police, I should always be as cooperative and as truthful and as honest as I can possibly be. That's all the cops are asking of their citizens, is just to be cooperative and honest. And as long as you're honest, then you're always in good hands with the cops. And, that may have been true back when I was a kid, back in the 60s and 70s. But that kind of advice today, that's the biggest crock of BS you could ever tell anybody, is to be cooperative and honest with today's law enforcement. As I've learned over time, cooperation and honesty will only get you in trouble, and I'll explain that here in a few. So I started out in life truly believing that the cops were our friends and, well worthy of the respect that they have from their citizens. And then by the time I became a young adult in my 20s, and after having a few bad encounters, I came to realize that there's a few bad cops out there. And that's all I wanted to believe, trying to be positive. I thought, yeah, there's bound to be a few bad apples in every batch. So with the cops, yeah, that's understandable and acceptable, I guess. And then by the time I was in my 30s, I began to realize that, no, I think there's at least as many bad cops out there as there are good cops. And by the time I was in my 40s and after a few more bad encounters and more I realized, I said, I think everything's turned about 180 degrees here since I was a kid. Now I think that there's only a few good cops out there, and most of the cops out there are corrupt as hell. And now here I am in my 50s, and I question whether or not there's any good cops that still exist. Even if you are a cop on the up and up, who doesn't violate any of your citizens' rights and doesn't falsify their arrest reports or anything, even if you're on the up and up, still, if you know that there's a lot of corruption going on around you within your department and you don't say anything, then you're just as guilty. And they never say anything because they know damn good and well that if they want to keep their jobs, they're going to keep their mouths shut. I've talked to a few former cops who said that they either quit on their own or were forced to quit because they wouldn't shut their mouths about all the corruption going on around them. My point is, the cops today are a different breed than those of my youth. I truly believe that the cops of my youth did earn all of the respect that they received from their citizens, which was a lot. But the cops today, I can't think of another time, certainly not in my lifetime, that I can recall when there were such hostile feelings from the citizens towards the law enforcement. It's greater today than I've ever known, and it's easy to see why. The cops today are not about protecting and serving. They're about harassing and collecting. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that cops aren't doing their jobs. The police objective all along has been to keep the community safe. And they do so by finding and ridding it of all of the bad folks out there who hurt and violate other people. Hopefully, they're still meeting that objective, but only when they're not so preoccupied with shaking down innocent citizens. I remember when I was a young man in my 20s, early 20s, and I talked to this Vietnam veteran, and he had a lot of bitter feelings towards our government. He felt that the government had really screwed over the war veterans who'd put their lives on the line and given their hearts and their souls for their country. And he was homeless on the streets. And he told me, he said, "It's a crime to be poor in America." And at the time, I had no idea what he meant by that, but I soon learned, believe me. If you're poor, the greater chances are that the cops are going to mess with you. The meek are always the easiest prey. It's always been that way in predator-prey relationships. And so poor people, you know, they can't afford attorneys. They can't afford to take time off from work to make court appearances and stuff like that, to try to meekly fight the charges that they don't have any chances of winning. So all they can do is give themselves to the mercy of the courts. But yeah, as a young adult, I remember, you know, here I was this dirt poor guy, just barely existing, living a hand-to-mouth, paycheck-to-paycheck existence, just trying to get by, living out of t-shirts and dirty jeans. And I remember I had this older model, beat-up, ugly eyesore of a car. Had a primer top because the vinyl had been torn off sometime before I ever got it. But anyway, just constantly, I was always being pulled over and taken out of my car and body searched, and then had my entire car searched and everything dumped upside down. And, you know, it was just a common routine. And I asked one of the cops as he was releasing me, I says, you know, this is really getting old. What can I do to avoid getting pulled over all the time? Why is it that you pulled me over? And he told me straight up, he said, the looks of your car. In other words, as soon as he saw me, he knew, oh, there's a poor guy driving this car. You know, he's easy prey. And I'm sure my looks didn't help. I remember at the time I had my hair grown out, nowhere near as long as it is now, but it was kind of shaggy, and sometimes I wore a beard. And it just seemed like everywhere I went, even if I was just walking down the street minding my own business, it seems like anytime cops saw me, they would immediately have this attitude of, ooh, this guy's got to be guilty of something. We don't know what it is, but we'll just, you know, harass this guy until we can finally find something to pin on him. And so what do you think the most common ticket that I used to get when I was younger, back when I was this dirt poor guy? The most common ticket I always received, I don't know how many times I received this ticket, but it was always for failure to provide insurance. I was too poor to have insurance. I was lucky enough that I even had a car that ran. You can ask anybody who knows me. Throughout my life, I have never violated anybody. I've always been a hardworking guy, a contributor to our society. I've done a lot of volunteer time and energy towards various humanitarian causes and so forth. You know, I'm always willing to help out anybody, whether I know them or not. You know, if anybody needs my help and I can provide it, I'm there for them. Never has there ever been a time where anybody felt the need to call the cops on me. And yet, throughout my life, I don't know, I couldn't count how many times I've been harassed the hell out of and had my rights violated. And so although I've never violated anybody in my life, still there has been a few times over the years where I was actually arrested and thrown in jail. And it seems like it happens about once every 10 years. But I've always been arrested on the same offense, possession of marijuana, which, as we know, is now legal in some form in more than 60% of the United States, and that number is growing every year that there are state voting. And I don't know, I guess maybe I was just a little ahead of my time, but as I try to understand the law now, in order for there to be a crime, there has to be a victim. And I've always asked, who are the victims in my crimes? Who was it that I hurt so much that it was worthy of me being arrested and thrown in jail and having my freedom taken away from me? Anytime a citizen is fined over a victimless crime, it's nothing less than extortion. While I'm on the marijuana subject, you should understand and know this. In order for a cop to search your car, he has to have probable cause. So what do you think is the most used probable cause excuse that cops use to search your vehicle? I smell marijuana. Why do you think that is? You think maybe it's because the human sense of smell is one of the senses that can't be picked up by the video camera? The cop never says that he saw something or heard something that's suspicious, because you can verify that on the camera. So they always say they smell something, and of course, the cops, you know, the courts just have to take their word for it, as they always do. And I think another reason why they use that excuse a lot is because if they're wrong, there's no repercussions. If a cop claims he smells marijuana and loots through your car, and if he doesn't find anything, you can't sue him for violating your rights or your privacy or anything like that. You can't file charges against them. No, it's just, whoops, I guess I was wrong. And I had this one friend of mine tell me, he said that the excuse that the cop used, he claimed he smelled marijuana, didn't find anything. And then afterwards the cop said, well, it must have been coming from one of these cars passing by on the highway here. Yeah, right. Also keep in mind now, if a cop doesn't have probable cause, then he has to have consent. And if he asks for your consent to search your car and you tell him no, they are prone to bring out their police dogs to smell out drugs. And you should know this, these cops do train these dogs to give false positives, false alerts. It could be the way they tug on their leash, or the cop could cough. He could train his dog to give a false alert on the sound of his cough or something. You never know, but that's no guarantee they're not going to claim that they smell something and search your car anyway. Well, now I'd like to address the why question. Why are so many cops today corrupt? Simple. State revenue. It's trickle-up economics. The states put pressure on their law enforcement agencies to make as many arrests as they can on whatever trumped-up charges that they could muster up, as long as it will bring them some revenue. And that pressure is applied from the chiefs and sheriffs on down the chain of command to the patrolmen on the streets. Here's one example of how this works. Since our subject is on drug possession, law enforcement agencies, they receive money every year from state drug enforcement agencies, and the amount that each department receives is based upon the number of drug-related arrests that they make every year. Now notice that I didn't say that the amount that they receive is based upon the number of drug-related convictions that they get every year. That would be a whole different ballgame. So the cops on the streets, they're hungry to make drug arrests more than any other kind of arrest. Now, you, the average citizen, you could have your prescription pills on you, and if you can't prove what they are and that they're yours that have been prescribed to you, you're looking at trouble. Or you could be carrying some talcum powder, or there could be dust on your dashboard, and they could say, ooh, that looks like cocaine. You never know. But my point is, drug arrests are very common, false drug arrests, and even if it's weak and it gets dismissed, the cops don't care because they get to chalk it up as another drug arrest for the cause. It's called generating revenue. Now, to understand how law enforcement works, look at it from this perspective. Cops wear uniforms and they have ranks, just like the military. And so any kind of job where the worker wears a uniform and a badge and is in a position of authority over the citizens, whether it's a cop or a park ranger or whatever, they run it as a military operation. And they have ranks and they have stripes on their sleeves, and even emulating the military to the point where their ranks have the same names, whether it's, sergeant or lieutenant or captain, whatever, It's a rank and file chain of command, with each putting pressure on the lower order for more production, while at the same time they are hard-pressed to impress their higher orders with their production. So if you do well, you'll raise in the chain of command and get higher paychecks, and the whole system, it's all about earning stripes on your sleeves, that's all. So with this work ethic, who do you suppose are the most overzealous and eager to impress on the entire chain of command? The bottom chain, the cops on the streets. It is an admitted fact that when law enforcement agencies test their applicants, they don't hire those who had the highest scores. You'd think that they would, but no, they prefer mid-level scores. Now, why do you suppose that is that they wouldn't hire what appears to be their most intelligent applicants? Probably because intelligent people got that way by asking a lot of questions. And they more than likely have good morals and a conscience, all the things that they don't want in their cops. The ideal cop in any department is one who is just smart enough to do the job and just dumb enough to take whatever it is that they cram down their throat and just say, yes, sir, and do it without questions. Never ask questions. So the young cops today, they're put out there on the streets and they're told, go out there and make quota. Arrest as many people as you can. And they do so without a conscience. They can care less whose lives they ruin, as long as it'll get them a good pat on the back and give them an impressive work record when they're due for a promotion. You see, cops today are not enacting justice. They're merely serving as a means of profit for the state. It kind of makes me think back about in American history, the pre-automobile days, back in the frontier times when people traveled around the country in horse-drawn covered wagons. And they had these outlaws and bandits out there who would stop and rob them, and sometimes they'd kidnap them and hold them for ransom. And these outlaws, they were known as highway robbers. Isn't it sad to know that this sort of thing still exists today, but today the bandits are wearing uniforms and badges? It's what I like to refer to as land pirates. That's all they are, land pirates. So now let me address the how question. How cops are corrupt. You're going to see some of the ways here in this dash cam video in a moment, but before I show you that, please keep in mind what I said before. The big mistake that I made here was that I cooperated, and I answered all of this cop's questions, and I answered them freely and honestly. Everything that I'm warning you now not to do is what I did here. You have to understand that when cops talk to you, no matter how casual they may appear, all they're doing is looking for a reason to arrest you. That's all. And the more you talk to them, the better chances are they're going to find a reason to arrest you. When a cop talks to a citizen, it's what's known as fishing. They're fishing for a reason to arrest you. And each question that they ask, it's like they're throwing out their line in a different area of the pond. And they've got this strategy all worked out. You see, they start off asking very innocent, non-incriminating questions. Hey, where are you going? What are you going to do there? Where are you coming from? Well, once they get you to talking and answering their questions, then they hit you up with the incriminating questions. The kind that if you answer wrong, it'll get you arrested. Do you have anything illegal in your car? This and that. Well, once they've got you talking, then you feel obligated to answer all their questions. That's certainly what happened here with me. And as I've learned now, several times now over my life, a cop will pull you over for any lame reason that he could think of, whatever he can imagine. But their true motive is not to give you a warning or a ticket, as they claim. It's just so they can go fishing for an arrestable offense. And something else you need to keep in mind when you're talking to cops. It's okay for cops to lie to you. The Supreme Court has said in so many words it's okay for cops to lie to the citizens. They may say that they have a witness against you or that your friends turned you in and ratted you out or whatever. You know, don't believe anything cops say. I think it was George Carlin that once said that lying is a part of the cop's job. Their job is to protect and to serve and to perjure themselves whenever it'll support the state's case. So just know that it's okay for cops to lie to you, but you can't lie to the cops. If you lie to the cops, you can get charged with perjury or disorderly conduct or disruption of an investigation, whatever they think up, they can pin it on you. And now I'd like you to meet the star of the video. I want you to meet Texas Highway Patrolman Eiran Guillermo Rodriguez. I guess Eiran is how you pronounce his first name. It's spelled E-I-R-A-N. But Kid Rodriguez here, he is the epitome of everything that I explained and described earlier. He's a young, overzealous rookie cop out to impress his superiors at the expense of others. He doesn't care whose lives he ruins as long as it'll make a good impression on his boss. So he's everything that you want to be aware of, a douchebag. So this little incident occurred back in May of 2014. I was on my way back to my home in Tennessee from California. Now at the time I was holding dual residency because I was going back to California for about 6 or 7 months every year, helping take care of my father, who was up in his 90s by this time. In fact, he died about a year after this. But after spending about 7 months in California, making my way back to my Tennessee home, I had my car packed, especially the trunk, neat but very tightly packed. And among my contents in my clothing bag in the trunk, I had approximately about 3/8 of an ounce of medicinal marijuana that I purchased legally in California. And now the Texas Panhandle, it's roughly about 150 miles across. And about midway across in the city of Amarillo, I stopped, I ate a big breakfast, I filled up my car with gas and got some road food, got back on the road. And then about another midway between Amarillo and the Oklahoma state line is when I got pulled over. So let's take a look at this here. Now you'll see here I was late in turning on my turn signal. I was going around this big rig truck here and I was fiddling with my CD player trying to put a CD in, and my right tires had already crossed over the line before my turn signal turned on. So there was his excuse to pull me over. Now I want you to watch here how I operated my vehicle upon getting pulled over and stopping, because I was charged not only with possession of marijuana, but I was also charged with DWI, driving while intoxicated, which I haven't had a drop of alcohol in me in God knows when, but just tell me if it appears at all that the operator of this vehicle is intoxicated. Could any cop ask for a more perfect stop? Now, something that's also important to note here, notice how this dash cam video is not tamper-proof. There is no embedded time file or audio wave file displayed, nothing stamped on there in any way. And since this happened, I went out and bought a dash cam, a little cheapie. I think I paid like $30 for it, and it shows the time and date on it. So need I ask why the Texas Highway Patrol is so behind in their technology, and why would they use dash cam that's so primitive as this?
Hey, Texas Highway Patrol reason for your stop, failed to signal your lane change.
Yeah,
Your front tires.
I pulled out a CD, and right when I did that change, I saw you back there. I thought, that wasn't cool. But...
Now, I want to pause here for a moment to discuss a major police corruption tactic. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's called profiling. It's against the law, but corrupt cops use it all the time. So understand here, as I'm traveling eastbound across the Texas Panhandle, I happen to have California license plates on my car. I just purchased my car when I was in California. And the cops are well aware that all of the states to the north and to the west of the Texas Panhandle, they're all legal marijuana states in one form or another, either medicinally or recreationally. They're aware of that. So when they see a car traveling eastbound across the Panhandle with a license plate from one of these surrounding marijuana states, what do you think the chances are there's going to be some marijuana in that car? At least 50%, they know that. And I'm sure that my long hair didn't help. But as soon as he pulled me over, and as soon as he approached my vehicle, he immediately had a marijuana suspicion brewing. And he documented that in his arrest report here. Of over 100 details, he lists here, detail number 13 of 102, quote, I could immediately smell the odor of marijuana coming from inside of the vehicle, which is total BS because I don't smoke weed in my car, and especially when I'm driving. Number 14, quote, I observed the driver to be smoking a freshly lit cigarette as if he was trying to cover the odor of marijuana with the odor of the cigarette. Now, I don't know if he's lying about this or not. I may have been smoking a freshly lit cigarette. I don't know. But even if I was, if you ask anybody who's addicted to tobacco, ask any smoker, what are some of the reasons why you might randomly light up? If this was the Family Feud, then the number one answer would probably be to calm your nerves. And what, you don't think that a citizen should feel a little nervous when he's getting pulled over by a cop? But no, the way this cop is trained, he sees that as an excuse to search your car. And you know something else that I've learned over the years? It's always these young, rookie, overzealous cops. They're the ones who always write up the most sensational arrest reports. Let's take a look at some samples of that here. Numbers 16 through 19, he claims, the driver went to hand me a debit card or credit card as he passed over two different states' ID or driver's license cards. The driver pulled back the card immediately when he realized what he was handing me. The driver then handed me a Tennessee driver's license, passing over what looked like a California driver's license. I asked to see both licenses. I take it that he's trying to imply here that I was so intoxicated that I couldn't tell the difference between a driver's license, a credit card, and an ID card. Yet a minute before, I could pull my car over and come to a complete stop without a hitch. That an intoxicated person can do. And you know, the truth is, here's what happened. I had my wallet open, I gave him my driver's license, my Tennessee driver's license. He saw my California ID card in my wallet and asked about it. I should also point out here that this cop is conveniently not wearing a body cam, so there's no way to disprove all the crap that he's spewing in his arrest report here.
Your driver's license insurance.
Yes, sir.
What's in Tulsa?
Cousin. Slowly making my way back to my home in Tennessee.
Oh, yeah?
And, making a few stops along the way.
Right. Why don't you hand me that California license, too?
Well, that's an ID.
Okay. Please just hand me both of them. You used to live in California?
I grew up there, and I've been living in Tennessee for like 17 years now, and my father's way up in years. He's like 93, so I go back and spend a few months with his family out there. Sometimes doing dual residency. Let's see, that should be all there. Okay.
Do me a favor, help out me real quick.
So he has me exit my vehicle, and his reasoning behind that is he listed number 21 here. I thought it was out of the normal motoring public to have two different ID cards from two different states, so I had the driver exit his vehicle and enter mine. So this Texas native is not aware that his state gets an influx in population during the winter months. I know people personally who live in northern snow states and they winter in Texas. They hold dual residency just like I did at the time. So, a weaker excuse I never heard. So let's analyze this order. What is the objective of the highway patrol? Isn't it to keep the highway safe, to get the drunks off of it and tend to any accidents or breakdowns or mishaps of any kind? That is the objective, is to keep the highway safe. Yet this guy's going to contradict his own job objective by having me step out of my vehicle and walk along the highway where there's cars and trucks zipping by at 70 plus miles an hour, probably no more than 5 or 10 feet away from me. Now, reiterating what I said before, the big mistake I made here was I cooperated and I answered all of his questions, and I did so honestly, everything that I'm telling you not to do. And now, as I understand it, when a cop asks you to step out of your vehicle, he's asking you. He's not ordering you to. So that was my big mistake, and I would advise you to do this. If a cop asks you to step out of your vehicle, ask him if it's a lawful order. And if he says that it is, then ask him to explain why it's a lawful order. I've also been advised that you should never roll your window down more than an inch or two, just enough to pass paperwork back and forth. They can hear you fine, no matter how much they may say, roll your window down all the way. Now, don't give them the opportunity to reach into your vehicle and open your door and physically drag you out. Okay? And if they say they're ordering you out, then comply, but at least you'll have it on record. Now, before we listen in, take note of what I mentioned before. This is not a tamper-proof dash cam video. There's no timer stamped on it. There's no audio waves that matches up with the sound that you're hearing embedded on there. And now you'll see and understand why that is. Let's see what my cooperation and honesty, let's see where it got me here.
Okay. Warning for that. With the warning is no fines, fees, or penalties by signing here stating you received a copy of the warning.
Okay. Anything else?
This is your copy on this. Let me answer your question. Is there anything illegal in the vehicle?
No, sir.
All right, no automatic weapons?
No.
No bomb-making materials?
All I got in there is I got a pet ball python snake.
Okay. Where's that, in the trunk?
No, I got it
Is it in the cooler?
5-gallon bucket in the back seat.
Okay.
Anyway. All right, Officer Rodriguez.
Is there any automatic weapons, as I asked before?
No.
Okay. No child pornography?
No.
No bomb-making materials?
No. Believe me, I'm not a freak.
Okay. Any drugs in the car?
No, sir.
Okay.
All right.
Any heroin? I'm not done.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, sir. I'm clean
Okay.
as a list, I guarantee you.
Any cocaine?
No.
Any methamphetamine?
No.
Okay. You give me verbal permission to search your vehicle?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, I have probable cause to search your vehicle with the smell of marijuana, so a search will be done in your vehicle, okay?
Here's the problem. With no timer or sound wave embedded on the video, the audio track of this video has been dramatically manipulated. There was some dialogue that's been removed. There were other things said and done where it was taken out of where it was originally at and moved to other places to make it sound more incriminating. I'm sure you've seen this. I know comedy shows do this a lot. They'll take a speech that a politician made, and then they'll take stuff out and they'll move stuff around, and by the time they're done, it comes off sounding like he said something that he never said. That's the case here. Now, the reality is, as soon as he gave me my signed warning, I tried to leave. I opened the door. I remember the last thing I said to him is I said, all right, Officer Rodriguez, you can hear that in the video, but he moved it to some other place to make it sound like I'm trying to weasel out of his questioning. But I was going to say, thanks for letting me off with a warning, but I didn't get that far. As soon as I said, all right, Officer Rodriguez, I opened the door to leave. He stopped me. He said, wait, close the door. I'm not done talking to you yet. So then I closed the door back up. And his first line of questioning, he asked me if I was on any prescription medication. And I told him I was, and he asked what they were and what they were for, and I told him. And then I remember he was saying, he said, is that it? Is that all? And I said, yeah. And he said, are you sure? And I said, yeah. And then he said, well, what was that marijuana card that I saw in your wallet? And I said, well, yeah, I have a medicinal card for when I'm in California. And then he went on to questioning me about if I had anything illegal in my car. Now, I talked to some legal minds after I was arrested, and the feedback that I got was that where this cop really screwed up was that I should have been free to go once I received that signed warning. And as the law works in technical terms and all, it was explained to me that you are considered under arrest from the time a cop turns his flashers on you to the time that that transaction is completed, which in this case was when I received my signed warning. So at that point, I was no longer under arrest and had every right to leave. The fact that he kept me beyond that fact, he was thereby rearresting me. Now, if a cop has any kind of suspicions that the driver might be intoxicated or there might be anything illegal in the car, those suspicions or concerns or hunches or whatever, they have to be addressed during the course of the original arrest. So these are things that he should have looked into before he handed me my signed warning. The fact that he kept me detained after that was unlawful. In order to rearrest somebody or detain them, they have to have committed a crime. And what crime did I commit in the split second from getting my warning to trying to leave, opening the door? So upon hearing that, once I hired my attorney, that was the very first request I made. I said, get a copy of the dash cam video. That will exonerate me. That will show that he unlawfully detained me beyond that point. And so then when I got the copy and I reviewed it, out of the entire hour-and-a-half video, the only part where he manipulated and tampered with it was during this crucial part here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put things back to where they originally happened, and I'm going to include the missing audio that he edited out.
Okay. Warning for that. With the warning is no fine, seizure penalties by signing here stating you received a copy of the warning.
Okay. Anything else?
Alright, this is your copy on this.
All right, Officer Rodriguez.
Wait, close the door.
I'm not done.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Let me answer your question.
By any chance, are you on any kind of prescription medication? Yeah, a few. Yeah, what are they and what are they for? I'm on a couple of different meds for anxiety, and I'm on a couple of different pain pills for a pinched nerve in my neck. Yeah, what else? That's all. Are you sure? Yeah. Well, what was that marijuana card that I saw in your wallet? Oh, yeah, I have a medicinal card for when I'm in California. Yeah?
Is there anything illegal in the vehicle?
No, sir.
All right, no automatic weapons?
No.
No bomb-making materials?
All I got in there is I got a pet ball python snake.
Okay. Where's that in the trunk?
No, I got him
Is it in the cooler?
5-gallon bucket in the back seat.
Okay.
Anyway.
Is there any automatic weapons, as I asked before?
No.
Okay. No child pornography?
No.
No bomb-making materials?
No. Believe me, I'm not a freak.
Okay. Any drugs in the car?
No, sir.
Okay. Any heroin?
No, sir. I'm clean
Okay.
as a whistle, I guarantee you.
Any cocaine?
No.
Okay. You give me verbal permission to search your vehicle?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, I have probable cause to search your vehicle with the smell of marijuana, so a search will be done in your vehicle, okay?
Yeah, well, see, the problem here is his probable cause wasn't based upon a reasonable suspicion like it's supposed to be. It was based upon a hunch. And there's a big difference between a reasonable suspicion and a hunch. And his hunch was that I was coming from California, I had long hair, and I happened to have a medicinal marijuana license in my wallet. So the big lesson I learned here that I want to emphasize to everybody now, don't be an idiot like I was. If you have a medicinal marijuana license and you're in a non-marijuana state, don't have it somewhere displayed in your wallet where the cop can see it when you open your wallet to give him your driver's license. So the dash cam of a police car is supposed to be impartial evidence. Anytime there's two sides to a story, they always say, well, let's go to the video, because the video never lies. It never lies unless it's been tampered with. So the big lesson that I learned here that I'm driving home to you now, always record the cops. Don't rely upon their video evidence. Always record the cops from the moment they pull you over, the moment they confront you. And what's a wise idea is to live stream, or make sure that you've got some kind of backup online somewhere or something, because a lot of times the cops will take your phones and try to delete your video. So make sure that you've got backup on that. My arrest occurred on May the 19th, but the arrest report wasn't written up until May the 22nd, 3 days later. Wouldn't it make more sense to write up your arrest report immediately after the arrest while all the details are still fresh on your mind instead of trying to recollect them some 3 days later? But as I pointed out here in his arrest report here, he listed over 100 precise details of everything that was said and happened, and in the exact chronological order as the video. And now the cop obviously reviewed this video before he turned it in as evidence. And as a young rookie cop, I'm sure he had a superior officer there watching it with him and pointing out his flaws, the mistakes that he made, and then leave it up to him to correct them however he sees fit. So I pointed this out to my attorney, and he said that, yeah, that's legal. The cops can do that. They can review the video evidence before they submit it. And my argument is, if it's going to be impartial evidence, then it shouldn't go through the plaintiff arresting cop's hands before it goes in, any more than it should go through the defendant citizen's hands. He shouldn't have had any more access to that video than I should have before it went in as evidence. So you see, the point that I'm making here is that the video dash cam of a police car will not exonerate you. Don't expect it to. That's not its intention. Its intention is to convict you, however they have to manipulate it to do so. How impartial is video evidence that's not tamper-proof and is allowed to go through the arresting officer's hands before it gets submitted? Now, something else I wanted to point out here. Notice in the arrest report that the cop lists every question that he asked me except for one. Let's review that.
Is there anything illegal in the vehicle?
No.
All right, no automatic weapons? No bomb-making materials?
All I got in there is I got a pet ball python snake.
Okay. Where's that, in the trunk?
No, I got him
Is it in the cooler?
5-gallon bucket in the back seat.
Okay.
Anyway. All right, Officer Rodriguez.
Is there any automatic weapons, as I asked before?
No.
Okay. No child pornography?
No.
No bomb-making materials?
Believe me, I'm not a freak.
Okay. Any drugs in the car?
No, sir.
Okay.
All right.
Any heroin? I'm not done.
No, sorry.
Okay.
No, sir. I'm clean
Okay.
as a whistle, I guarantee you.
Any cocaine?
No.
Any methamphetamine?
No.
Seems like he left out one question. Let's listen to that again.
Is there anything illegal in the vehicle?
No, sir.
All right. No automatic weapons?
No.
No bomb-making materials?
All I got in there is I got a pet ball python snake.
Okay. Where's that, in the trunk?
No, I got him
Is it in the cooler?
5-gallon bucket in the back seat.
Okay.
Anyway. All right, Officer Rodriguez.
Is there any automatic weapons, as I asked before?
No.
Okay. No child pornography?
No.
No bomb-making materials?
Believe me, I'm not a freak.
Okay. Any drugs in the car?
No, sir.
Okay.
All right.
Any heroin? I'm not done.
No, sorry.
Okay.
No, sir. I'm clean
Okay.
as a whistle, I guarantee you.
Any cocaine?
No.
Any methamphetamine?
So why did this cop list every question that he asked me but this one? Why was this particular question omitted from his report? Could it be it's because he wasn't asking me as an officer doing an investigation, but he just wanted to know for his own personal perverted curiosity? So you see here, he's searching my clothing bag, and bingo, he found what he was looking for. So moving ahead here, now I'm in handcuffs, I'm under arrest, and he's put me back in his patrol car to take me off to jail. And whoa, what do you know? He happens to have a cab cam. In addition to his dash cam, now he's got this cab cam that he just turned on. Now it stays on from this point forward for the entire drive to jail. I calculated this out. I was in his squad car for a total of 63 minutes. The first 8 minutes, when he was questioning me, that was with the cab cam off. The last 55 of the 63 minutes, when I was in handcuffs and under arrest, that he's got it all recorded on the cab cam. Now it seems to me like a reversal of proper use. During those first 8 minutes, before I was under arrest and I wasn't in handcuffs, what if I had pulled out a gun and shot him in the head? You would think that they would want to have that close-up photo of my face from the cab cam that they can flash all over the news that night as a guy wanted for shooting a cop. So what was he hoping to capture during those 55 out of the 63 minutes while I was in handcuffs that he wouldn't capture when I wasn't in handcuffs? But take note here, those first 8 out of the 63 minutes that I was in his squad car when he wasn't running the cab cam, so therefore all you're hearing is our voices being spoken over the non-tamper-proof dash cam, that was the most crucial part of this entire stop. That's when everything changed from getting an innocent warning to being arrested and hauled off to jail. Why was it at the most crucial part of this entire stop he was not running his cab cam like he did the other 55 minutes after I was arrested and in handcuffs? Do you think that these cops are trained on when to use their equipment and when not to? Because I know this guy had to be trained to how to do all this stuff because he's obviously too stupid to figure it out on his own. Now, I mentioned before how it's always these young, overzealous rookie cops who write up the most sensational arrest reports. And a few more examples of that. There's a whole bunch that I could show you, but for the sake of time, we'll just review a couple more here. Now, in his report, right after I got back in his car, he states, "When Mr. Corbin sat in my vehicle, I noticed him to be breathing heavy, as if he had just run a great distance. I had just walked up a steep hill from down in a ditch where he had me standing," and he did mention that in his arrest report. "But watch my breathing closely here and tell me, now, do I look like a guy in his 50s with bad knees who just walked up a steep hill, or do I look like somebody who had just run a great distance, as he claims?"
You taking me to jail?
I am. That's when I said you're under arrest for possession of marijuana.
Yeah. But isn't that lawful? I mean, I purchased it legally.
No, we're in Texas.
Right, but I didn't have it open and out.
It's not a gun. It's marijuana. It's illegal in Texas.
Well, I wasn't going to take it out anywhere where it wasn't legal.
Where you buy it is where you gotta have it. Period. You can't transport it. No matter if you bought it legal or not.
Okay, well, I was being just as honest as I can be with you.
Well, you weren't honest. You lied to me about how much marijuana was in the car.
You asked me if I had anything illegal. I wasn't considering that illegal.
Yeah.
And so
Marijuana is illegal.
If I had any marijuana was the one question he didn't ask. Now, shortly after that, he reported, Corbin fell asleep in my vehicle. Here's what he calls falling asleep. Watch closely here. Watch my eyes. Now, you see me blink a time or two. So a truthful report would have been, he fell asleep with his eyes open and for all but a few seconds, if that makes any sense.
So how much in total was in your car?
I purchased a quarter ounce before I left, and I've been delving into that, so it's less than that.
A quarter of an ounce?
Yeah. So it would be less than that. Maybe 3/8.
It's more than that. What year's your car? 2012?
Yeah.
Now, you just heard our disagreement there over the amount of marijuana that I was carrying. I said something about a quarter of an ounce, and that was my mistake. I was wrong there. I meant to say that I had left California with a half an ounce, which would have been accurate. See, when I was in California, I used to make my purchases. I'd buy 1/8 of an ounce at a time, and I knew that I made 2 purchases before I left, so I was thinking quarter ounce, but I realized later on that those 2 purchases I made were for quarter ounces each. So I had left California with a half ounce. I'd been on the road for about 10 days by this time. I just spent a week in New Mexico, so 3/8 of an ounce was more of a proper estimation. And I did mention that there.
Maybe 3/8.
But now notice at the end of this dialogue here what he says.
Did you weigh it?
No, not yet. I'll weigh it though.
So he said he was going to weigh it, but guess what? He didn't. Nowhere on the arrest report is the exact amount listed anywhere. Instead, just like the rest of his sensational arrest report, he gave a visual estimation of 2 to 4 ounces. 3/8 of an ounce looked to Kid Rodriguez like 2 to 4 ounces. That's what he charged me with, which I'm sure got him some great accolades from his boss when he got back to the station. So you see here the tow truck has arrived to steal my car. The first time I got busted for possession was way back in the pre-legal days in California, back in the early 90s. And the cop, he wrote me up a citation and let me go. Now that was more than 20 years before this. So it was a real surprise to learn that there are still states so primitive in law that they would kidnap you and hold you for ransom and lock you up behind bars over a victimless crime. They towed my car to a wrecking yard about 10 miles away, and they held it for a little over 24 hours, and then they charged me about $420 to reclaim it. And besides that amount being excessive, I find it kind of ironic that for a marijuana arrest, they charged me $420 to give me back my car. So do you think that these cops get kickbacks from the towing companies that they use and call on? Well, after this happened, when I was seeking legal advice, I actually talked to a former Texas cop who said that he used to get kickbacks all the time from the tow companies that he called on. It's like it was a known fact, like he didn't even try to hide it. So let me ask this. What is the job of the DEA? And what is the job of the ATF? Do any of these agencies patrol the highways and pull over speeding motorists and ticket them for it? No. So why does the Highway Patrol do their jobs for them? And how is that meeting their objective? How is searching for vehicles for unlawful materials meeting the Highway Patrol job objective of keeping the highway safe? So if this cop pulled me over for being late using my turn signal, do you wonder if he ever pulls anybody over for talking on their cell phone while they're driving? Let's see what a great example this Highway Patrol officer sets on safe driving. We're going to do a little count here on how many times he uses his cell phone. Now notice here, we've been pulled over for quite a while. As soon as we get back on the highway, what's the first thing he does?
Hello? Yeah.
So after this third call, I finally called him on it.
But you said in Texas they don't tolerate marijuana, but
It's illegal.
right, okay, but it's lawful to lock on local legal. But a lot of the states I'm in, they can't do that.
That's any ordinance. We're not.
So his excuse is it's only a city ordinance, so it only applies in the city. All right, so let's keep that in mind as we proceed. You'd think that he would at least have Bluetooth so he can drive with both hands.
What's that? You gonna be at the office?
That's my point, so I'll handle Apple safety.
Alright, I'm gonna have,
Tell me 10 space out of 10 for transport. Approximately 6 miles.
So he talked on his cell phone on 8 separate occasions within a 21-minute time period. That's an average of 1 call every 2.5 minutes. And 3 times while violating what he calls his city ordinance. I felt this cop was rubbing it in my face, like, I'm above the law because I wear a badge, so I can do what you can't. Now that's not all. Let's take a look at some of his other violations while he's driving. Here you see that just seconds after he got off the phone, what does he do? He opens up his laptop and plays on that for a while as he's driving. And now later he plays on it some more. Now watch this. He's going to cross over the solid white line on the right here as he's coming off. He's talking on his cell phone. Now you see he's going to drive over another solid white line.
yeah, I can hear you.
Now there's a stop sign up here. Okay, let's see if he comes to a complete stop as every good citizen is required to do. And nope, he runs through a stop sign.
Wow.
If any cop ever saw any citizen doing that, you know they'd get pulled over and ticketed for it. So he blows through a stop sign while he's talking on the cell phone, and as I'm thinking about it, I don't hear his turn signal going. I've done a sound check in my car. Anytime I'm recording in my car and I turn on my turn signal, you can hear it. So that's at least 3 violations that he's committing simultaneously. I find it quite absurd that a man whose job objective is to keep the highway safe would so blatantly drive as preoccupied as he does. And once at the jail, he sat out here in the middle of the street double parked for quite some time. Who else could get away with that? Now there's one more count that I want to make. Now listen in here as I'm being stuffed into his patrol car.
I don't know about that.
Oh, that's better. You can be sitting there for a while so get comfortable.
Okay.
Is that how you want to sit?
Well, if I have to keep these cuffs on,
Yeah.
they're killing me, but...
Yeah, you gotta keep them on.
Alright, I guess that's what I'll do.
So I was stuffed into the front seat, and with his laptop table out and the seat all the way up, man, I had a hell of a time just getting in there, let alone I was trying to prevent having to sit on my handcuffed wrist, which was pretty much what I ended up having to do. And those cuffs were on so tight that the slightest movement just caused extreme pain. So we're going to take a count here. You can just see by my facial expressions here. We'll count how many times I cringed in pain.
Okay, appreciate it. Can I use this Valley Port? Is it open?
This man is flat out of the table and trying to get people in the parking lot now.
Okay. Well, I'm headed in. So just, okay.
I've all been taken out before, and all stay there for them.
Okay. Is there anybody in the lobby? It went away from what it was.
Where is that? What mile was it?
It's not full of drugs. How much did Wolf Python cost you?
Oh, I think I paid like $75 for that out of a pet shop.
Is that bad? We're almost there. Hey, it's Rodriguez. Would you be able to have animal control meet us there?
Yeah.
Tell me 10 space out of 10 for transport.
Approximately 6 foot to 6 miles. Starting in a white Toyota Camry. License plate 19.
Hey, they're pulling that car out right now. Am I good after that?
He did take my...
Oh, come on, man, hurry.
So for the cost of having some personal use marijuana, I cringed in pain a total of 34 times within 42 minutes. That's an average of once every minute and 12 seconds. So on the drive to jail, I'm looking at this guy and I'm thinking, I know he's more than half my age. I'm more than old enough to be his father. He's got to be, as overzealous as he is, he's got to be a rookie cop. So I had that verified.
How long you been on the force?
Over a year.
So now we're back at the station, and for very suspicious reasons, he waits until now to give me the field sobriety test. Why didn't he give me the field sobriety test when we were out on the roadside? Why does he wait nearly an hour and a half later to do it here inside this tight garage? Well, you'll see why here in a few. So he began by issuing me the eye test, and he does this off camera for whatever suspicious reasons. I think that might be him in the window reflection in that door there, but I don't know, there's a few cops hanging around there.
Okay. See the white light? You need to follow with your eyes only. Don't move your head. Okay, don't look past. I'm going to know if you're trying to cheat the test, okay?
But he tried hard to trick me while he was giving me the test. That's why I think he did this off camera. He told me to keep my head still while I just moved my eyes as I followed the head of his pen. And then at some point, very quickly, he lifted it up real high and quickly. And he just held it there for several seconds. And I'm keeping my head still, and I got my eyes at the top of the sockets there. And after so much strain, this is what you hear me say.
You're out of range without moving my head.
Over here with me. Okay, what I want you to do is stand right here, facing that way. Face that way, perfect. Okay, with your hands feet together, hands on your side, just like this. Okay. See your left foot? On your left foot, pretend there's an imaginary line.
Pretend that there's an imaginary line here. If you pretend that something is imaginary, wouldn't that make it real? Who appears to be more intoxicated here?
Coming out of your left foot. Then you place your right foot in front of your left foot. With your right heel, touch your left toe, just like this.
Now keep in mind, this is nearly an hour and a half after he pulled me over, and he flunked me on all the tests and added a DWI charge. Now how intoxicated would somebody have to be to fail a field sobriety test nearly an hour and a half after he last possibly could have had any kind of intoxicating intake? Here is his reasons for failing me. Now for the eye test, it was over some jargon that can't be confirmed or denied. He did this off camera. But he failed me on the walking the line because he claims that, among other things, that I, quote, was missing his heel-to-toe steps and stepping off the line. Now let's watch here. Gee, how convenient for him. We can't see my feet in this view. It's being obstructed by the hood of a squad car there. So now you know why he waits until now to conduct his field sobriety test, inside of this little tight garage instead of out in the open range by the roadside. But even with the obstructed view, you can tell I never stepped off of his pretended imaginary line.
pick a leg, doesn't matter which leg you pick. Okay, and you need to raise that foot about 6 inches off the ground. Okay? With the bottom of your foot parallel to the ground. Okay? And you need to count in this manner. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004.
Now he's going to fail me on the one-legged stand, where I have to stand on one foot and count for as long as I can. And his reasons for failing me is because he said that, among other things, that I was hopping and putting his foot down.
Can you do it again?
1001, 1002,
And of course, once again, the camera doesn't capture that, but it certainly doesn't look like I'm ever hopping. And if the idea is to count with one foot up, then if you put your foot down, the natural reaction would be to start the count over again. So now you know why this cop waited until he got back to his police station to give me his field sobriety test, where my feet are out of the camera range and therefore he can fail me on all these different reasons that can't be disputed by the video camera.
You are under arrest for the offense arising acts have been committed while operating a motor vehicle in a public place or watercraft while intoxicated, or an offense under section 106.041 Alcoholic Beverage Code. You will be asked to give a specimen of your breath and or blood. The specimen will be analyzed to determine the alcohol concentration or presence of a controlled substance, drug, dangerous drug, or any other substance in your body. If you refuse to give a specimen, refusal may be admissible in a subsequent prosecution. Your license, permit, or privilege to operate a motor vehicle will be suspended and denied for not less than 180 days. Whether or not you are subsequent.
I agreed to a blood test, so from here he took me over to the local hospital to literally take my blood, and then from there he brought me back here and put me in jail. Now, since this happened, the legal experts that I talked to, they all said that you should never submit to any test from cops. Don't ever submit to a field sobriety test or a blood test or any other kind of test. In other words, don't assist the cops in their efforts to incriminate you. Nothing good's going to come out of it for you. You saw what happened to me here. I was as sober as a preacher on Sunday, and yet an hour and a half after I was pulled over, he claimed that I failed his little sobriety test, and then I had a DWI charge to fight, and that was more serious than the marijuana charge. But I guarantee you that's the last time I will ever cooperate and submit to any test from cops. I only submitted to the blood test because I knew it was going to come back clean, so I figured if anything that will work in my favor. So just to give you a little rundown on the aftermath of all this, I was locked into a jail cell with 3 other men, and I was in there for a little over 24 hours. Now, of the 4 of us, 3 of us were in there on the same possession of marijuana charge. There's state revenue for you. And you know, for me, I suffer from anxiety. I'm usually on meds for that, but of course, by the next day, I was off my meds, and man, I was just going crazy. The other guys, they were nice guys and everything. I got along with them okay, but man, it was such a relief when as I was being released, they pulled me out of my jail cell, and you know, I wasn't in handcuffs or anything, but they had me standing in front of my cell while they were drawing up the documents and getting the release papers going. And while I'm standing there, this cop comes in, and as he's walking by me, he says, "Well, did you have a nice night in jail?" or something along those lines. "Did you enjoy your jail stay?" or something. And it wasn't until just as he was passing by me, I'm looking at him, and then I realized that it was Kid Rodriguez, the cop that arrested me. So once I saw that it was him, and I just yelled out to him, I said, "F you," unabbreviated. And he just kind of chuckled and said, "Oh, I guess not." So when I was finally released, the jail personnel there, they told me that my car was just a few blocks down the street at a local wrecking yard. I walked down there, and they said the guy running the place wasn't there. He would be back in an hour, so I waited in the heat for over an hour. Then when the guy finally shows up, he tells me, he said, "We don't have your car here. Where was it towed from? Interstate 40? Oh, well, then your car's in the town of McLean. That's at least 40 miles from here." And I called down there, and they verified that they had my car, but they said that they closed at 5 o'clock, and by now it was like 3:30. And I had to walk across town a few miles to the animal shelter to retrieve my pet snake. In the meantime, they had taken my money and reimbursed me with a check, so I had to walk over a mile before I could even find an ATM machine. Meantime, I'm calling the woman that bonded me out, and she's not answering her phone, and I'm leaving her messages telling her about how I'm stranded out here. And fortunately, she did come through for me. She found a friend of a friend, some guy who met up and picked me up in a parking lot out there in his pickup truck. A real nice guy, and I paid him, and he ran me down there, and I thought for sure I was probably going to have to sleep in some back alley down there somewhere, but fortunately we got there with minutes to spare, just a few minutes before 5. And then after paying this extreme amount, it took me about another hour before I can get out on the road because Kid Rodriguez, you know, I'm just coming back from California after 7 months. My trunk was just packed with stuff, and Officer Rodriguez there took all of my stuff, pretty much everything out of the trunk of my car, and then dumped it into the back seat, dumped all the boxes out and everything. So I had to spend about an hour out there in the heat just getting my car organized again and so forth. And finally, when I get on the road, and I knew I wasn't far from the state line, but I just took a deep breath, and I knew I wouldn't feel comfortable until I got out of Texas. And right after I got out of Texas, you know, within 15 miles into the state of Oklahoma, I got pulled over again. And now it's dark, and it played out. I mean, this young cop, another young cop, probably about the same age as Kid Rodriguez, almost the exact same script. You know, he's real nice and cordial to me, just like Rodriguez was. And he asked me to step out of my car and come back and sit in his squad car. And I'm thinking, here we go again. And I'm just thinking, as soon as he starts asking me about anything illegal in my car, I'm going to tell him, dude, save it. Texas already got me. If you want to bust people for anything unlawful in their car, you need to be monitoring the westbound traffic before they get into Texas. But fortunately, it didn't come to that. You know, the cop remained cool. And but now his excuse for pulling me over, here's what he told me. He said, well, the reason why I pulled you over is because I saw you weave a little bit inside your lane there. You didn't cross the line or anything. And then right away, he surmised, he says, but it was probably just the gust of wind. We get lots of wind gusts around here. But I got to show my boss that I'm working. I got to show my boss that I'm not just sitting on the side of the highway doing nothing. So you see, this is what the citizens are subjected to now. We have to go through the inconvenience of being pulled over and harassed just so these young cops can impress their bosses. Surprisingly, this story does end on a positive note. As violated as I was, the charges against me were eventually dismissed, thank God. And I know when I first hired my attorney, like I mentioned before, the first immediate request that I made was get a copy of the dash cam video. That will exonerate me. And at the time, my attorney told me, he said, cases like these, they very rarely ever go to trial. He said it'll always get settled before going to trial. Well, once I got a copy of the video and saw how this cop tampered with it and manipulated it the way he did, I called and told my attorney about that. And I told him, I said, I want to go to trial. If the DA should offer a dismissal, refuse it. I want to go to trial. I want to get this Kid Rodriguez in the courtroom and nail his butt to the wall. I want the courts to see and expose what these cops are doing, which unfortunately that never happened. But what happened is after a couple of years, I was checking with my attorney every year, and after a couple of years went by, I called him, and he told me, he said, just sit tight and be patient because there's some rumblings going on right now. And evidently, Officer Eiran Rodriguez screwed up somehow, and I never really got the story. I've heard phrases like questionable behavior and conduct unbecoming an officer. Whatever happened, they transferred him down south by the Mexican border, where I heard that he was now patrolling an area that's known as the hellhole of Texas, like the hottest, scorchingest place in the entire state. And I know that for a fact. I mentioned before how I came from a law enforcement family. I know people personally who that's happened to, where if they don't want you on the force and they can't legally fire you, they'll make your life a living hell until you eventually quit. That's happened to some people that I know. If they can't fire you, they'll force you into quitting. So evidently this is what happened to Officer Eiran, Kid Rodriguez. He was down there in south by the Mexican border, and then I heard that he screwed up again. This was after about 3 years when I checked back with my attorney again. And whatever he did there, I guess they had suspended him for a while, and they were going to reassign him to a worse hellhole than that, if such existed. And then after a couple of weeks, when they tried to contact him to give him his new assignment, they couldn't reach him. He disconnected his phone, and I guess he didn't want to be found. So Kid Rodriguez is no more. Although I might warn, these guys slip through the cracks all the time and get hired on with other cop agencies. So I'd like to forewarn any agencies in the Texas Panhandle area, hire at your own risk. But I don't think for a minute that the Texas highways or any other highways in America are now safe when they get rid of guys like these, because the way this guy was so obviously trained in these corrupt tactics, you know that he wasn't the only one that they trained that way. You can assume that all the cops that are out there are doing the same thing. So after bonding out and paying to get my car back and then having to hire an attorney and a few other expenses after that, by the time this was all over and done with, I was out between $4,000 and $5,000. So what's the big lesson here? What did I learn, and what am I trying to pound into you, the viewers who are watching this now? Let's review some of the things that I mentioned before. Number 1, stay in your car and only roll your window down enough to exchange paperwork. If a cop insists that you step outside your vehicle, ask him if it's a lawful order and have him explain how it is. 2, always record the police. Have your camera tab on the face of your cell phone ready to record at a moment's notice. And having a dash cam as a backup helps. They are affordable. I only paid about $30 for mine. If a cop tells you to stop recording them, refuse. You have every lawful right to record them. It's covered in the Constitution. It's in the First Amendment. I saw a video where a cop asked a citizen to stop recording him. His excuse was, he says, "For my protection, I need you to stop recording me." And the citizen told him, he said, "But I'm recording for my protection," and kept it going. Cop dash cams are not impartial evidence. It's their evidence to be used against you, however they have to present it. 3, never talk to cops. They have this strategy to trick you into talking. They start off asking you simple, easy, innocent questions, and then lead into asking the hard, arrestable questions that you now feel obligated to answer. Don't go there. If a cop tries to question you, just tell him, "I do not answer questions," and leave it at that. Or if you want to be polite, you can say, "I choose to exercise my Fifth Amendment right to remain silent." Saying such things lets them know that you know the law. 4, never cooperate with cops. If a cop asking you to cooperate means that he's asking you to waive and give up your constitutionally protected rights, refuse. And don't ever submit to any testing. Again, don't assist the cops in their efforts to arrest and convict you. I have a card that I made up and now carry with me. This is something that I picked up on YouTube since this happened. And fortunately, I haven't had to issue it yet, but whenever I get pulled over again, I'm ready to hand this over to the cop along with my driver's license. This is what it says. "I hereby invoke and refuse to waive all of the following rights and privileges afforded me by the U.S. Constitution. 1. I invoke and refuse to waive my Fourth Amendment right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. 2. I invoke and refuse to waive my Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. And 3. I invoke and refuse to waive my Sixth Amendment right to an attorney of my choice. If I am not presently under arrest or under investigatory detention, please allow me to leave." Here's something else that I now carry with me. I keep this in the glove compartment of my car, so if they ever ask for my proof of insurance or registration or whatever, I'll be sure to hand this over along with it. It says, "To all cops, 1. My window is down far enough. I can hear you just fine. Do not try to open my door. They are always locked. 2. Before you ask me for anything, you need to state the reason for pulling me over. 3. You are being audio and video recorded for my protection and your accountability. 4. I do not speak nor do I answer any questions from cops. Any information you need to know will be on my driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. 5. I do not consent to any searches or seizures. If you truly feel the need to search my vehicle, get a warrant. I will be happy to wait. And 6. What you put into this stop is what you get back out of it. Respect my rights and it will be quick and pleasant. Thank you for your cooperation." So I hope this video opened some eyes and educated you all well concerning your safety from those who you need to fear the most when you're out in public. And in closing, I'd just like to give a big thank you to now former Texas Highway Patrolman Eiran Rodriguez. From this experience, he's turned a once passive guy into a warrior who was out to put a dent in police corruption. I've joined an alliance that's quite widespread, actually. I've discovered that there's a whole bunch of other people out there who have suffered through the same kind of injustices as I have with bad police encounters. And what are we doing about it? We're arming ourselves with video cameras. I find this to be a civic duty that you should all participate in. This is necessary now more than ever to monitor the police. Unless you trust the Internal Affairs Department, who, regardless of how blatantly obvious it is that their officers violated their citizens' rights and acted very unlawfully, still, regardless, they always find that their officers committed no crime. They are innocent of any wrongdoing. So police cannot police themselves. It's up to the citizens to do this. As I've learned, there are citizens all over America who will stop and record the police anytime they see that they're detaining some of their fellow citizens. And I'm not saying that every citizen that gets detained is truly innocent, and my hats do go off to the good cops out there who are keeping our community safe and enforcing real laws. But by recording the police, this is what's known as accountability. It keeps the cops honest. And I don't know how many times I've seen a cop do a major attitude adjustment once they discover that they're being recorded by a citizen. So it keeps them honest, it keeps them accountable. And if you'll recall, prior to the video days, it was always the cop's word against the citizens, and in a court of law, who did the judges always side with? Claiming, well, you have no proof. Okay, so believe me, video cameras are a very valuable tool to have with you at all times. It could save your hide as well as the hides of your fellow citizens. I recall I saw this one video where a citizen is recording a cop and the cop's getting annoyed and he turns to him and says, "Don't you have anything better to do?" And the citizen replied by saying, "Well, I guess not. Maybe it's because the cops ruined my life, so now I have nothing better to do but to record them." So I guess this would be a good time to announce my next video documentary project. It will simply be titled Policing the Police. And I'll be sure to alert the masses once that's completed and posted. In fact, how would you like to have a little sneak preview? There's more to learn here. I shot this near my home in Tennessee. Now, the local sheriff's department there, the Ray County Sheriff's Department, spelled R-H-E-A, they have a known reputation in this community for its corruption. In fact, I personally experienced some of it myself several years ago. That's a different story. But anyway, I was coming back into town and I saw on the side of the highway there were several cops swarming around this family SUV, and they had a cop inside of each of the four doors looting through it. So, of course, I immediately flipped a U-turn as soon as I could and came back and parked on the other side of the highway and got out and immediately started recording them. This was my first time ever doing this since I was arrested. First time I actually got out and participated in the civic duty of monitoring the cops and recording them. And so this was my first time doing this, but certainly not to be my last. So with all these cops looting through this family's vehicle here, how many times inside of each door must a car be searched? Well, since I like to count things, we'll do a count here. These two driver's side doors in the foreground, let's count how many times inside of each door do they search it. I only recorded for about 10 or 12 minutes, but what was each cop hoping to find that the previous cop didn't? Or is it possible that one cop was planning something for the next cop to find? Now, before we continue, there's someone I want to introduce you to here. This is Detective Mike Bice, the most corrupt cop on the most corrupt force around here. Bice has a known reputation for assaulting innocent citizens. He suffers from the Napoleon complex, or short man syndrome. He's a little tiny short guy who's got a big chip on his shoulder. And I mentioned before about how I had experienced the local police corruption here. Several years before, this Detective Bice ran into my house without a warrant and assaulted me and arrested me on a bunch of trumped up BS charges and got away with it all by filing a very fallacious arrest report, which next to nothing in it was true. It was almost all lies. And at the time I had too much to lose. I was just beginning my teaching career, so I settled on some reduced charges, and it cost me a lot of money and put me through a whole lot of emotional stress. But when I saw that he was on the scene, I thought, he of all people needs to be monitored the most closely and recorded by the local citizens. So I knew that what I was doing was more necessary than I originally anticipated. Now notice here that I've been spotted by this cop on the right here. Now, shortly after he sees me, he alerts his fellow officers. You'll see he's going to lean in on the opposite side of the car there, say something, and then immediately after, what does Detective Bice do? He takes quick notice of my presence. So now he's going to come over and confront me. I'm not sure if that's all that lawful to cross the highway like that. I'm sure that if I had done that, then he would have ticketed me for jaywalking. But obviously I'm of no threat. I'm standing out there in the wide open, not trying to hide or conceal myself. And if he did think that I posed a threat, I don't think he would have walked over 100 feet to cross the highway and confront me.
Can I help you?
No.
Okay.
Now, before we proceed, there's a few important details that I want to point out here. With all the research that I've done since my Texas arrest, and all the educating that I've done of myself, reviewing all these videos on YouTube and all that, I've learned some very important things that's good to know. And among them is that, first of all, when a cop approaches you, he doesn't know you from Adam. So he doesn't know if you're just a dumb, uneducated hick whose rights he can trample all over, or if you're an intelligent, educated guy who knows his rights and knows the laws and knows what this cop can and can't get away with. So the first thing they do when they approach you is they kind of feel you out a little bit to see how hard they can press you. And among the other things that I've learned is that one of the ways that a cop will try to intimidate you into stopping you from recording them is they'll threaten to take your camera from you. They'll say that they're going to seize it as evidence. Well, that's unlawful. A cop cannot just walk up to a citizen and take his property away from him. There's a procedure to that. It's called getting a court summons. They have to file paperwork through the courts if they want to seize your property as evidence. And something else that I've learned is that a cop can ask you to ID yourself, but unless you've committed a crime or they have reasonable articulate suspicion that you're about to commit a crime, you do not have to identify yourself. So with that in mind, let's proceed here.
What are you doing?
Videotaping?
Videotaping?
Recording, yeah.
All right. Well, good deal. That might just be used as evidence. Thank you.
Well, get a court summons.
What's your name?
I don't need to give that.
You sure?
Yeah. Now notice here that as soon as he started pressing me about identifying myself, I immediately turned the camera on to him. And he was quick to realize that the more he harassed me, the more I was going to make him look like a complete idiot. So he was smart enough to pick up on that right away, and then you'll see his quick about face.
What's your name?
I don't need to give that.
You sure?
Yeah. Am I breaking any laws?
Well, you're standing here videotaping law enforcement.
You don't want to be on
Kinda
camera?
like you're
Why don't you want to be on camera?
Well, I didn't say we did.
Okay.
I'm just kind of wondering what you're doing.
All right, well, that's what I'm doing.
Have a nice day.
All right, you too. I guarantee you that if I wasn't rolling video, then his attitude and behavior would have been a whole lot different than the Mr. Nice Guy character that he portrayed himself to be on camera. Well, now I'm going to pretend like I'm Jerry Springer here for a moment as I give my closing commentary. A little final thought. You know, before my recent arrest, not that my attitude towards cops was all that great before then, but since my recent arrest, my attitude has changed quite a bit towards cops, and that will be reflected if and whenever I get confronted by them again. But this is just stuff that all kind of came to light through all the research that I did, but I think every citizen should know this and keep this in the forethought when confronted. You have to understand and know this. Unless you've committed a crime, the cops have no authority over you whatsoever. They don't own you. You are not their property. If anything, you own them. They're public servants. Your tax dollars pays their salary. It pays for the squad car that they're driving. It pays for the gun and the uniform and the badge that they're wearing. It pays for their office and department and all the workings there. So you don't have to answer the cops. They have to answer to you. And just as I said before, unless you've committed a crime, you do not have to identify yourselves. But the cops are required to identify themselves whenever a citizen asks for it. So anytime you're confronted by cops, immediately get their name and badge number and get it on record. And even if you're out filming the cops while they're detaining your fellow citizens, at convenient times pipe in and get each and every cop on the scene's name and badge number. Get it recorded. Get it on record. And so I hope that this production here opens some eyes and will help to protect yourselves whenever confronted by any corrupt cops, which I don't know if there's anything but that out there anymore. So just be on the lookout for my upcoming production of Policing the Police. It'll be a nice little documentary. And until then, God bless you all.